Quiet, please. In exactly 15 seconds, we'll be on the air.
When I was 6 years old, my brother and I would lie down in the living room with our heads up against the Zenith radio, which was about 4 feet high, a piece of furniture, and listen to radio programs. And that was the beginning, that was it. I never had to be asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? I wanted to be on the radio. Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy and Jack Benny and Inner Sanctum, and all kinds of programs. In those days, they had everything. Well, I was completely in a listen mode, and that's the beauty of radio, of course, is you have to listen to it, and you have to picture everything in your own mind, and looking back at it, you're participating more than when you're watching television, let's say, something like that. But I fell in love with all these people on the radio. So I would get a book, Alice in Wonderland books or something like that, and I would read it, and I read it very well. Just picked it up and read it with feeling. So it was already there. It's part of the gift that I was given. So where's a more natural place to read it than on the radio? In high school, I went to a local radio station, and we would put on a top 40 show on Saturday nights, and would get from the kids in the high school what songs they liked, and then would sit down and DJ the whole thing. And that was my first actual job. I look up at the clock on the wall and come right up to the hour and click into position, and I became fascinated with clocks as well.
Well, Saturday night and I just got paid.
And then I went into college. We had a program there where once a week we would put on called It's a Small World, something like that. And we would listen to shortwave broadcasts at the school station. And we would gather news from Radio Moscow and China and all these different, and put a news program on every week. The next step was going into the Army, because there was a draft in those days. And you didn't have to worry until you had graduated college, and then you had to be available for the draft. So I I enlisted for 3 years. And so I figured that way at least I could choose. They said you could choose either your theater of operation, where you would go, or what you would be learning to do. And it worked out. I sent first to Fayetteville, North Carolina, Fort Bragg. And then we started doing a weekly program there. Then I really hit pay dirt, because then I ended up working for American Forces Network, and that's where we did programs and played music and all kinds of wonderful radio things. We did a program on wine tasting, and I had never tasted wine, quite frankly, before I went to Germany. So I went down into where they had the casks of wine, and this German showed me, what you do this and you pour this. And each time he showed me a different wine, you'd take a little sip, so it was wine tasting. I got back to the studio and was listening to it, and I could see in my voice the change as we went along. It didn't get too bad, but I was definitely affected by the wine I was tasting. Yeah. And then they put me on the boat to come back to America. And I was going to look for a job in New York City. That's what I was going to do. Work for the city of New York at their AM/FM TV station, WNYC. And that's when I started doing, it was classical music, so DJing classical music. And once in a while doing a feature program. And really that morphed into news. Worked for a time there for one of the newspapers. And the newspaper owned a radio station. And so it was news, 15-minute newscasts on the hour, which was not unusual then, but certainly is now. Yeah. I figured eventually I was going to have to move someplace like Shell Point. Might as well look now. So I came out here for one time. I said, okay, well, that's what it's all about. And then I'm sitting in a doctor's office and I see my first Shell Point Life magazine. I picked it up and looking at it. It had this story about how they'd just done some upgrading and some changing and everything. And I said, and that they have all these channels. I said, really? So I called up and I said to the fellow who had showed me around before, and I said, I'd like to talk to whoever it is who runs this station here. And talked to him, and I said, told him what I did, what I would like to do. I'd like to do a program here, stories and poetry and what have you. He said, fine. When you move in, come on down. So I moved in and came on down. It's a half-hour program. It's listening to the words. It's, I use material, a lot of it written by people who here at Shell Point. And it's any and all subjects. Try to be careful to get some humor into it, not get too serious. And always enjoy getting feedback from people who just said, oh, we watched such and such, or listened to such and such a program. I did what came naturally to me and went where it took me. And I'm very happy that I ended up here at Shell Point where I could continue it. So it's just worked out well.